Hello and welcome to this round 15 here at Grand Prix Sao Paulo. We have Pedro Perini on the left of our screen. He's on Grixis Shadow. He's at 11-2 and a draw. Jose Echeverria, he is 12-2 with Mardu Pyromancer. Now 11-2 and 1. That's very much kind of the win and then keep your fingers a little bit crossed, because it's by no means in every GP guaranteed that that's going to be a good enough record.
Yeah, he absolutely cannot afford a draw. Maybe Jose Echeverria could, but it's not going to be an option here. This is an interesting matchup we have. It's Grixis Shadow, a deck we've had seen previously on stream, and also Mardu Pyromancer, the popular choice for players that like to play mid-range. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of trying to line their threats and answers perfectly, a lot of picking the right choices with short discard spells.
Yeah, there are some decks in Modern, your Ad Nauseams, your Storms of this world, that are essentially doing their level best to ignore everything that's going on the other side of the table and just win the game. That would not be how I'd describe either of these decks. Very, very interactive, whether or not that's through having lots of removal, lots of disruption, lots of hand disruption. Here we see an early Inquisition of Kozilek. It sees a Blood Moon. Blood Moon can potentially be a little bit problematic for Grixis Shadow, though seeing it in advance will impact on how fetch lands get used by Pedro Perini here. And then, you've got discard coming on the other side, and actually he takes the Inquisition on the other side of the table, basically not wanting to have to go blow for blow when it comes to hand disruption.
Yeah, not only protecting perhaps the best card in his hand, but also protecting the information that Jose could have, and could potentially decide how he's going to play his next turns based on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as if either of these lists are going to do the 1-2 punch that we sometimes see with humans of look at your hand and then use a meddling mage or similar. Cabal Therapy is not in this format, though I'm sure Mardu Pyromancer would love it if it were. But getting that extra information really helps sequence terms, and denying Jose Echeverria the opportunity to potentially do that, a big deal.
Jose, I think, is one of the all-time great Chilean players. He's been qualified to the Pro Tour very recently. I'm sure he would love to be back again. As we see Pedro working through his life total, he's trying to get below 13. That's a range he can play his Death Shadows. But since he already saw a Lightning Bolt from Jose's hand, he's ideally going to stay at around 9 or 8 life. So his Death Shadow going to be a little bit safer.
Yeah, and this is not necessarily a matchup where throwing down that Death Shadow super early is going to be a good plan. There's a lot of ways that the Mardu Pyromancer deck can interact with it. It's got straightforward removal, it's got burn, it's going too low on life against this deck can be very, very dangerous. It has got a little bit of reach there, and it's also got, even something as simple as Lingering Souls, that's a source of damage that's actually a little bit fiddly for Grixis Shadow to interact with in a way that's not card disadvantage.
Yeah, it's very hard for Grixis to deal with that card during game 1. He cannot throw 4 removal spells at it and expect to win the game. The win to win a game through Lingering Souls is just to present a fast threat. But as we saw, Echeverria has Lightning Bolt, he has Fatal Push, so Pedro would need ideally a Grumag Angler to start pressuring his...
So here we see a young Pyromancer coming down. That yet another way that the Mardu Pyromancer deck can flood the board, either with creatures to attack with, or indeed an unending, or seemingly unending stream of blockers, and it almost certainly will prompt some sort of removal here if Pedro Perini has access to it. Really can't afford to leave the 2-1 in play for too terribly long here.
Yeah, so he's fetching the basic to play around Blood Moon, and that would perhaps mean that he doesn't have his life total at the exact same spot, but he has the Dismember to do exactly that, so 10 is almost safe for him to play the Death Shadow if he has it.
Yeah, managing life totals, one of the reasons that any Death Shadow deck ends up being quite difficult to play. While you do want to go low enough that your Death Shadow is a threat, you don't want to leave yourself too exposed, especially against lists that have burn. And it's one of those decks that rewards you for understanding roughly what the lists are for pretty much every deck in the format, so you know how safe or under threat you really are from what your opponent could have going on.
Yeah, what to counter, what answers your opponent could present when you're trying to go all in with a Timur Battle Rage. All decisions that are made easier if you have studied the format or if you have experience in it.
So here, a Lightning Bolt would not be enough to deal with Death Shadow simply because Polluted Delta sat there ready to cause loss of life in response to that Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, Polluted Delta can also grab Pedro his island if he wants to, effectively negating Blood Moon's ability to cut him off colors. Jose missing his land drops. He's going to have a Fatal Push to answer that Death Shadow. But beyond that, he needs to keep his lands going.
Yeah, the Mardu Pyromancer deck, it's not as if it's got a curve full of expensive cards, but it really does want to be able to cast multiple spells in a turn, and that's something that gets very difficult if you miss even one land drop.
Yeah, I think the third land he wants for sure there. Beyond that, he's going to probably hold in hand and try to discard for Faithless Looting. So Pedro now, he could grab his island, or he could grab a red source and try to flash back with Faithless Looting. Yeah, he's going to go with the island.
I think I like having the island in here now. It means that the extent to which a Blood Moon from Jose is able to punish Pedro is pretty limited. He'll have access to all 3 colors of mana relatively easily, and that's one of the various hurdles that these decks have to go through if they are looking to win the game.
So 7 life, I think it's the perfect spot for Pedro. It means he's not going to die to 2 lightning bolts, but also that his Death Shadow is going to be survive a single lightning bolt from Jose.
So now we have the flashback Faithless Looting, a little bit slower thanks to playing around Blood Moon, but I think that's perfectly reasonable. And Gurmag Angler, one of the pickups here, absolutely perfect draw. This is what he wants now, is to get a threat on the battlefield that's going to put some pressure on Jose's life total here. Yeah,
Faithless Looting from Grixis Shadow is an innovation made by Ben Friedman, I believe. He compares it to Legacy Brainstorm, how you're able to effectively draw cards when you discard lands that you wouldn't have a use for it otherwise. And it also helps accelerate the Gurmag Angler.
Yeah, Gurmag Angler, it's become a very, very potent threat in this modern format. It's got a giant casting cost, so Fatal Push is never going to get it. It's got a giant body, which means that most of the other removal spells in the format are going to struggle to one-for-one trade with it. I mean, it's pretty much you path to exile or you lose card advantage if you want to kill this one.
Yeah, Jose doesn't have an answer for it in his hand other than the Lingering Surge jump blocking. Then he top attacks Terminate, great.
So he casts a Lightning Bolt to the head there. Now he finds a Terminate to deal with Gurmag Angler, one of the few unconditional removal spells around in red-black that's going to be able to do it. 4 life, definitely danger zone for Pedro Perini, but it's really going to come down to who draws better right now, and it's much easier for Pedro to have a good draw right now because he has lands to work with. For Jose, even if he draws a good card, it may be that he simply can't cast it.
Yep, Pedro, despite all the drawings with Faithless Looting, cannot present a third threat to pressure Jose. Jose is now thinking whether or not he wants to fire that Inquisition of Kozilek. Yeah, he's going to choose that option.
Sees a couple of lands, a swing and a miss. I mean, this is one of those things where it's like, well, if my Inquisition reveals 2 lands, does it even feel that bad for me? It probably feels worse for Pedro right now.
Right, yeah. Pedro can sense that game's slipping away from him.
I mean, the life total's a very poor indication of how games are going, but that Inquisition revealing 2 lands in hand when there's only lands in play for Pedro Perini, a very good indication as to how this game's going.
Yeah, one player has it all, the other player only has 2. That kind of game usually favors the player who's stuck on lands, but it's not a guaranteed thing.
Yeah.
And he finds a white source.
This
Perfect for
is
Jose.
a big deal. Takes a couple of points of damage, but he's on still a perfect 20 life, so he's not going to mind that in the slightest. And Lingering Souls is going to be a big problem for Pedro Perini here. 2 spirits on the front end, another 2 on the back potentially. It's going to be really tough for Pedro to find a way of stopping these spirits for getting in for the final points of damage here.
I think his outs are Giant Preacher and Timur Battle Rage.
Yeah.
Faithless Looting is a good way to find those. You could drop up to 4 useful cards this turn, considering he has all those Dal lands in hand. It's a perfect top deck for the position he was in.
Still kind of relying on the cards that he draws being pretty good here. 4 life, not very much to work with.
Yeah, so the version with Mishra's Bubble and Faithless Looting, if it is the Ben Friedman version, that version does have Timur Battle Rage in the main deck. So I think he's playing to get that out.
Flashes back Faithless Looting here. Jose just looking on and thinking, oh, the Rapture, being able to cast multiple spells in a turn. Tell me how that feels, Pedro.
And okay, that's a land and a Mishra's Bubble. So we have to assume that he is now all gas in hand. Right, Gurmag Angler.
I mean, Gomag Angler, even with Teemo Battle Rage, is not going to be enough damage.
Yeah, you're right. Because that has time.
This is a strange kind of a race that we find ourselves in here. It's crazy that we're talking about Jose being afraid of his life total when he's at 18, his opponent's at 4, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Dreadbore in hand, though, that's going to be enough to deal with Gomag Angler.
Yeah, he fires off the Sideboard now. I think that's what he's supposed to do. Even though Gomag Angler is not going to be lethal by itself, he'd rather have a threat in board.
And the Lightning Bolt to finish things. Jose Echeverria, yes, he had some trouble in terms of his lands, but Grixis Shadow, it burnt itself down low, and then there were just enough answers from Jose at the right time to be able to stay in the game. Finally, Burn finishing things off, and that, I guess, the danger of playing one of these Death Shadow lists that is aggressively attacking its own life total. Sometimes your opponent can give you that final nudge.
Yeah, you can see some good sequencing by Jose in the last turn. Using the removal spell to try to bait a potential counter spell, which is actually what happened, which opened him the possibility of casting Lightning Bolt for lethal.
All right, the life totals resetting to 20 as we go to game 2 here. 40 minutes left on the clock, and these guys, they desperately want to be able to play a little bit more Magic in this tournament, and the only way to do it is to win this round, make the top 8, make the elimination stages here in Sao Paulo, Brazil. How much do these lists change after sideboarding in this one? Is it small incremental changes, or like neither of these decks feel like the kind of decks that you can just hose with one card?
Yeah, so from Grixis' perspective, it's really a dilemma in how to sideboard. He could treat it as a pure mid-range mirror and try to take out some of the conditioner cards like the discard spells like the Stubborn Denial, or he could treat his deck as a Protect Queen strategy that's really more based on trying to tempo and trying to ride Death Shadow to lethal quickly. I think he could potentially change his roles depending on whether or not he's on the play on the draw. Since Mardu Pyromancer is a very popular deck in Modern, I have to assume he play tested it beforehand, and he has his upmost strategy in mind already, and now he's just about trying to execute it.
Now, what you've kind of described there is exactly what I love about Magic. I think it's very easy as kind of an armchair commentator or, at home reading articles and so on, to focus very, very strongly on deck lists. Obviously, if you happen to have a deck list that has more raw power in it, that has some clever synergies in it, that is a very valuable tool for anyone to have going to a constructed tournament. However, having the plan, having your sort of internal monologue as to where you want to go and knowing when to deviate from that plan based on your draws, based on your opponent's draws, that's the reason that it's not always the same person winning every single tournament. Obviously, sometimes it is always Matt Nass winning the same tournament with a cool deck, but having the playbook of plays and knowing kind of when to zig, when to zag, how to maneuver around what your opponent's got going on, that's what makes a truly great player. It's not simply about the 75 cards that you bring to the room.
Yeah, you could have two players with the same deck list, and they are going to approach the matchup completely different based on personal preference, based on how they theorize the games, how they're going to happen. Now, I'm trying to take a look from Predator's sideboard. For instance, I notice he's not bringing Engineered Explosive here. I think if it would treat this game as just a pure grindy mid-range matchup, that's a card he would like to have to get rid of tokens. But if he's just trying to ride a giant creature with a Temur Battle Rage, I think that it's wise for him to leave it on the sideboard.
Now, one card I saw Jose, I believe, moving in after sideboarding is Surgical Extraction. Now, that's a card that typically you most frequently associate with, there's a combo deck and I want to take out their combo by removing a key card from the graveyard. I actually kind of like Surgical Extraction against some Death Shadow lists simply because they don't have that many threats. And if you can successfully surgically extract Gomag Anglers or Death Shadows, you really don't have very many other creatures that you need to kill in order to be able to go over the top and win the game, also significantly slow down what they have going on.
Yeah, I have to say that's a very interesting card. I wasn't expecting him to bring it for this matchup. I'm sure that's something he thought about beforehand. While that deck does not have that many different threats in game one, maybe some lists have access to Planeswalkers post-board, so it's not going to be a knockout punch by itself, and in some games it's going to be an absolutely do nothing, so it could potentially just cost him the game just having it in his deck. just kind of interested to see how it plays out. I mean, it's not something I would usually do, but if he's bringing it, I hope he has a good reason for it.
And I guess thinking about these nuanced moves based on preferences, based on what you've seen your opponent doing, something like a common trait that I see among some of the best players in the game is that they will lean towards playing decks that give them the opportunity to make these choices. The lists that are very, very linear, always trying to achieve the same thing, kind of very focused in achieving it, but equally kind of inflexible, I don't see as many pros moving toward. I mean, like, a deck like Burn is very, very powerful, but in many respects, it's always trying to do the exact same thing, and the tools it brings to the table to do that aren't super varied. There is certainly nuance and skill play in playing Burn, but one of the areas that it maybe falls down a little bit is being able to adjust your plan to your opponents. Various of these sorts of lists that we see in front of ourselves now, they have a lot of options available to them, and I think that's part of what makes them popular, especially at the Grand Prix and Pro Tour level.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, a lot of the skew associated with Magic, it happens before the game even starts. It's choosing the right deck for the metagame, properly fine-tuning your deck list, thinking ahead for sideboard plans. But, once the game starts, if you have that option to be flexible with your game plan, try to adapt to what your opponent's doing, it's just an additional way to leverage your skill.
So it looks like Pedro Perini here having to take a little trip to Mulligan Town here, going to go down to at least 6. He is on the play in the second game, so in some respects that hurts a little bit more even, not drawing on the first turn and being on 6 cards.
Yeah, we talked about how some decks use Mulligan as a tactical device or a strategic device. In this matchup, when you're facing a deck that has a lot of removal and a lot of discard spells, every mulligan feels a little bit extra punishing. So I have to assume Pedro just didn't see enough lands, or he saw too much lands and wanted to cheap his hand because of that.
Yeah, getting the right mix of land and spells, important in just about every walk of Magic that you want to play. Will 6 be good enough? If it's not, then he's going to have very few tools to work with. Mishra's Bauble, an interesting one. It occupies the space of... it thins your deck out, but it can sometimes make your mulligan decisions harder because it means that it's still a card that's taking up a space in your hand at the beginning of the game. So right here, Pedro, looking at his hand, and he's got fetch lands. He's actually got lands kind of in abundance alongside Mishra's Bauble. Fetch lands actually interact very well with that Mishra's Bauble because if he sees a card on top that he doesn't want to draw, he can choose to be shuffling it away right now.
Yeah, another deceptively powerful card. It's like a free scry, like you mentioned. A deck like Mardu Pyromancer, you can pitch Lingering Surge for a Faithless Looting, which means it's a much more acceptable card in the early game. But for Grixis Shadow, since he doesn't have access for that card or really anything that he can discard for value, it's purely a late game card. Like, try to use that Brainstorm effect that we mentioned, and that almost helped him out during game 1. But yeah, after Mulligan, having that in his hand is not what he wanted to see.
So a Mulligan being faced by a Thoughtseize, this is not how Pedro Perini would have drawn it up. There's a Faithless Looting, a couple of lands, and a Gurmag Angler, I think that is, in hand there. So Jose has an option here. He can either preemptively deal with an early Gurmag Angler. I mean, with a Faithless Looting, that Gurmag Angler could come down very soon indeed. Or he could choose to leave Pedro with just the one threat and a whole bunch of lands, not much else. That maybe not quite so exciting simply because at some point Faithless Looting can get flashed back.
Yeah, so Jose here needs to identify that Faithless Looting is not something that this Grixis Shadow deck can really abuse in the early game, while your Gurmag Angler is something that can win the game by itself. I'm sure he's thinking it through, just make sure he's not making a mistake, but I would be surprised to see... Okay, so he's making a play that makes me surprised here. Perhaps has a different approach in the matchup than I have.
I mean, I guess this way round, like either way round, he's not going to be facing down as early a Gurmag Angler. It's quite tricky to get a turn 2 Gurmag Angler here. Like,
I mean, it's just a fetch land away.
I guess that if Jose already has a piece of creature removal for that first Gurmag Angler...
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
Then Pedro is suddenly almost completely out of gas. We can see there's 2 Lightning Bolts in hand. That's not the best way of dealing with Gurmag Angler, though it certainly works. Essentially letting your opponent out on a mulligan, but Oh, Surgical Extraction. We spoke about it as being a card to bring in. Actually using it on Faithless Looting here.
Yeah, so he really values his ability to negate Pedro's Faithless Looting. He could have made the play of using it on a Grimmer Gangler, the Tatsis, and they taken away that threat from his deck entirely, but he chose the complete opposite direction, specifically to deny him out of Faithless Looting. Okay,
so a Cycled Street Wraith in response reveals that now we've got a hand with Gurmag Angler, whole bunch of lands, not a great deal else. Faithless Looting getting removed here, and now Jose Echeverria will be able to have a look through Pedro Perini's deck, and this gives a couple of useful bits of information to him. Firstly, obviously he gets to take out all of those Faithless Lootings. That's nice. It's certainly something that he's going to be pleased with. He's not going to miss any of them strategically or whatever, but he also gets to figure out exactly how Pedro Perini has sideboarded.
Yeah, so the upside from Jose's plan is that those extra lands that Pedro has, they're going to stay there. He's not going to be able to cast them for extra cards, so Jose pretty much has the very late game locked up just because of that line he chose. And now he can see, there's no additional Lingering Souls that maybe Grixis can do. We have, say, White Duo and Lingering Souls in the sideboard. So you're going to make a note of the number of Stubborn Annihilations, make a note of the number of unconditional removal spells. He sees the Green Lavamancer that's true. Yeah, he can work with perfect information from both this game and the next if there's a game 3.
Yeah, and something that's worth bearing in mind if you find yourself in exactly this position, maybe in a PPTQ, RPTQ, wherever you might be playing, you need to do that in a timely fashion. Like, yes, you get to look through your opponent's deck, and it's not just a matter of you get to remove the cards and then you have to put it down. You can look through and get a feel for what they've got going on, but if you start pulling out a pen and trying to carefully notate exactly what their deck list is, you will have both your opponent and potentially a judge giving you a hard time. Now, if you're on Magic Online, absolutely sure, yeah, get a screen grab of that entire deck. And
Snipping too.
Yeah.
Print screen.
Yeah, why not? But if you're in real life, the important things are figure out the cards that matter to you in the matchup. Make a note of how many of them there are in the list, and don't sweat the details too much, because at some point, whether you're, myself or John Finkel or Paolo Vittor down at Rosa, sooner or later you've got too many bits of information to process and you're wasting your time.
Yeah, that's a very good advice, Tim. That would be absolutely crossing the line, just taking notes after seeing your opponent's deck.
In fact, a lot of the time, I think the way that it often seems to get ruled is while you're looking at it, you can't make notes, but as soon as you've given it back to your opponent to shuffle, start writing down the cards that you care about and make the most of the time that they're shuffling at that point. So along comes Gurmag Angler. That much we knew was going to happen sooner or later. In this case, it happened pretty quickly.
Yeah, he found that fetch land he needed to cast Gurmag Angler turn 2, because that doesn't have an immediate removal spell for it. Now he might try to cast double Lightning Bolt, as you pointed out, and if Pedro found Stubborn Denial now, exactly this turn, he could stop that and win the game, as unlikely as it seems.
Yeah, I mean, even though Pedro has had kind of a stunted start here, there's still the potential for good things to happen, because he does have, now that he's got Linear on the Last Hope as well, a couple of pretty important threats on the battlefield.
Yeah, so even if Gurmag Angler dies, he's going to come back, and because of the Liliana Miner's ability, puts extra card in his graveyard, he's going to be able to cast it very fast too.
Yeah, Jose here, kind of the disaster for him would almost be if he's got a hand with lots of discard, because at this point, what's going on in Pedro Perini's hand is the least important thing compared to either what's in play or what's on the top of his deck or what's in his graveyard. All of those zones far more important than what's normally the hot spot, which is cards in hand.
Yeah, he's under pressure, and there are a lot of blanks that he can draw, as you pointed out. So, while I still think he's absolutely capable of winning this game, it's not exactly an easy position that he found himself with.
So, a Sacred Foundry being fetched up here. All 3 colors of mana available to this Mardu Pyromancer list. Day to day, much of the time, Mardu Pyromancer, really it's a red-black control deck with a tiny splash of white. But that tiny splash of white does prove relevant both in terms of Lingering Souls and potential sideboard cards, so not to be forgotten about. So there is a Lingering Souls, but is there a third land?
Oh, I think he has it. All right, it was hidden there.
Yeah, Blood Crypt is the third land.
Okay, that's very important for him.
Interested to see how he sequences this, actually.
Yeah, so he could try to play lingering surge to present jump blockers, but Liliana, after Last Hope, makes that play a lot of less attractive. And his other option is double Lightning Bolt and Gurmag Angler, but he knows he's going to come back soon because of Liliana. Really great job by Liliana here, by Pedro. Yeah, that's the line he chose. I think he absolutely had to do that play this turn. And now just, I'm not even sure what kind of answers he could have to Liliana on his deck. A Simless played Dreadboard, that would be a good one. Or he would, I don't know, wait for Pedro to minus it, so it's at a low enough loaded counter so he can fight a third Lightning Bolt at it, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Kolaghan's command that represents a couple of points of damage that could potentially snipe down Liliana if she chooses to -2. But right now, even a -2 ability is not going to be enough to get that Gurmag Angler back into play. It may be that actually Pedro plays it kind of cute and ticks up his Liliana for now. Now, you don't need to have a target creature to give her extra loyalty. Obviously, it's lovely if you do, but just getting her up to high loyalty, it both keeps her safe, and the -7 emblem, it's certainly not plan A. It's probably not even plan B for this Grixis Shadow list.
Yeah, tough call for Pedro this turn. If he minus in the hope of finding, say, a Death Shadow that he could cast, he's going to expose it to Code Against Command. I think Code Against Command is going to be very much in his mind right now.
So Polluted Delta here. Pedro's life total, as always, being assaulted both by Jose and indeed himself.
Right, so he's going to have 4 lands. Liliana is going to put 2 extra cards in the graveyard, so he could cast Gurmag Angler this turn if he wants to. Which would end up exposing his Liliana, as we previously mentioned.
But I mean, he would then be in a similar position to where he was at the start of his last turn, also at the end of his last turn, should I say, with a Gurmag Angler and a Liliana. I mean, if you're Jose, which one do you have to deal with first? It's got to be the Gurmag Angler, surely, because the Liliana is not directly killing you in quite the same manner that...
Right, so if Liliana dies, Pedro won't have, such a good answer for Lingering Souls. But if Jose spends his whole turn casting Code Against Command, he's going to be at 5 life, which is a very dangerous position against a deck that has access to Lightning Bolt, even though, maybe he finds it unlikely that Pedro kept that particular card in his deck after sideboard.
Tough spot here for Jose Echeverria here in Game 2. Of course, he did win Game 1, so even if things go poorly for him in this game, he does have the opportunity to bounce back in the decider. But we can already hear that, the screams of exultation from the crowd, either watching this game or indeed, around the room. Just there are players locking up top 8s all over this room, and all over the top tables, I guess. And it's a very big deal when it happens.
Hey, it's a South American Grand Prix. You can expect a lot of excitement when players see their friends making the top 8. Just it's a cultural thing. Players just tend to be excited over anything.
I must admit that it's very easy at the Pro Tour to find yourself supporting South American teams, because when it comes to the top 8 announcement, you know that if there is a South American player making it into the top 8, that you're going to hear about it.
Hey, glad you're here.
All right, 3 mana now coming from Jose. He does get down that Lingering Souls. Now that Liliana's gone, he's got a few blockers for that Gurmag Angler in the short term. But Pedro Pellini, it's not going to take him too much to upset that boat. And at 3 life, there are lots of ways that Jose Echeverria here could just lose this game.
Yeah, Timur Battle Rage, Lightning Bolt, even something like a second Liliana would just put Pedro in a dominating position.
As things stand, that Gurmag Angler is just attacking in for now. Fatal Push, a terrible draw in the face of Gurmag Angler.
Yeah, so Faithless Looting, okay, that's his chance to find a Terminator Dreadbore.
I mean, Young Pyromancer definitely represents a lot more blockers. Additionally, there is another Lingering Souls in the graveyard. I think that one way or another I want to be doing one of those two things. I do not feel comfortable only having one blocker because it just opens up more removal spells as ways that Pedro Perini could win this game.
So yeah, he could present more jump blockers, or he could just present 5 power worth of creatures so he can force a trade with Gurmag Angler. So
Young Pyromancer being played now. This is the one that he doesn't really want to be blocking with, but if it stays around for a turn, it means that he's going to be able to probably block this Gurmag Angler for the foreseeable future. And Pedro...
Okay, so no turn Battle Rage so far.
His draws right now, he's got a Kolaghan's Command.
Wow, and Jose is at 3. Dangerous position.
But I mean, you kind of want to kill that young Pyromancer, surely. This is a really interesting choice.
Or, he could, Jose deck doesn't have many ways to gain life. If he puts him at 2, then suddenly a second card against command could present lethal. He chose to kill the creature, and Jose, in response, is going to use Fatal Push in his own young Pyromancer just to get an extra elemental token out of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to lose both of the cards in your... Well, the card in your hand and the creature you have in play. You might as well make an elemental. Heads-up play there from Jose, and not one that necessarily everyone would have seen, and it's important in this sort of a situation. Do everything you can. If you can eke out the win here in this game too, all the pressure's off, rather than having to wait a whole extra game to potentially lock up a top 8.
Yeah, Jose will keep on his jump block plan. He still needs to do something beyond that if he wants to win this game. Oh, great card, Bedlam Reveler.
Fantastic draw there. 2 mana with all those spells in the graveyard, gets to cast Bedlam Reveler. Still enough mana to cast Lingering Souls in the graveyard or something based on what he drew. Doesn't give anything away in terms of what those 3 cards added to his hand are, because 2 spirits from the graveyard about as good as it gets right now. And even a cheeky little attack in with an elemental. I like a bit of that.
Yeah, it's time to turn the corner. Pedro did take a lot of damage early on with his own lands. That's a clock Pedro has to respect now. He can't just easily attack with Grimrock Angler anymore.
Now, I guess all of the cards that we've spoken about as being ways of closing the game out still hold true. Teemo Battle Rage and Lightning Bolt, a big deal. But now we have Grim Lavamancer. That another way that potentially Pedro Perini can just lock up this game 2, force a game 3.
It's going to be close. It's a very tight haste we have here.
I mean, a lot of cards in Jose's hand right now after that Bedlam Reveler, so it's certainly possible that he's got ways of dealing with one or both of those creatures now he's got his lands untapped.
Yeah, so if Pedro had used that Kill Against Command for damage, he would only need to dodge 1 turn of Pedro missing on removal spells.
It's another Bedlam Reveler.
Very interesting choice. He doesn't cast his Young Pyromancer beforehand, even though he's going to be discarded, because he wants to have an extra use of his lands.
And you know what? I believe he's just picked up 3 lands.
Uh-oh.
Now, on 3 life, it's not as if this exact turn Jose Echeverria is dead based on what's on the battlefield, but he's not in great shape.
No, so he didn't play a land the turn before, so he's still going to have 1 mana after flashing back his Faithless Looting. Thoughtseize not at all what he wanted to see.
Terrible draw. You do not want to be enabling prowess that way. 2 life, too much when you're on 3 and your opponent has Grim Lavamancer in play that will be active very, very shortly.
Yeah, so Pedro survived the turn through all that velocity from Jose. I'm not sure he gets a turn beyond that. It's going to be at 6 life facing flyers and multiple attackers. But hey, he can win the game. Yeah,
this is a very, very close game now. Now, I'm not sure that Teemo Battle Rage is going to be able to handle the level of blocks that Jose have. I guess he only needs to get 1 point of damage through, though, with that Grim Lavamancer. So this is super close.
Right, so I can't quite see what he draws. It seems to be a black card, not a red card.
It's a Death Shadow.
Okay, so he can't win this game with turn. Now it's all about figuring out if he can survive another turn. He absolutely can block both Bedlam Revelers, and the other remaining creatures won't be lethal by themselves. Jose doesn't have anything good in hand, though.
Wow, 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 this is close.
Another discard spell.
This is what we talked about. These discard spells, once your opponent doesn't have very much left in their hand, they're kind of the worst draws that you can find. And Jose Echeverria here, he's got a pretty impressive board, but I don't think he's going to be able to push through the final points of damage before Grim Lavamancer end of turn dealing 2. There are 4 cards in that graveyard, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to look to Jose's graveyard, see if there's another Faithless Looting that we missed. I don't think there is. So Pedro just needs to exile 2 cards. I think he does have it for
He definitely has 2. I'm not quite sure. I can't quite make out if he has 4.
Yeah, I think he has a discard spell in his hand that he can cast next turn. Yeah, no, that was a Death Shadow, not a discard spell. So yeah, he might not have that card. That would be insane.
Yeah, there's only 1 card left in the graveyard. Pedro Perini needs to find a card that he can get into the graveyard in order for this Grim Lavamancer to be lethal. So many live draws now for Pedro Perini, but this is insanely close. He's found...
Oh, he got it. Thought Scour for the win.
Thought Scour himself, yep, quite happy to put a couple of extra cards in that graveyard. Draws a card on top. This will be enough to force. This is only forcing a game 3, mind. Still needs to actually win this match, but we will be going to a game 3. And a big roar from the crowd there as the decider is forced by Pedro Perini.
Hey, a fan favorite already.
Whew. We got some more magic on our hands here.
Yeah, that's how a game that is worth a Grand Prix top 8 is supposed to look like.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to get to that top 8 and not feel like you deserved it.
Right. Now imagine if Jose had perhaps chosen to discard Gurmar Gangler with that early Thoughtseize, following it up by exiling with Surgical Extraction. Of course, it would be a completely different game because Pedro would have a lot of more mileage out of the Faithless Looting. But, Jose perhaps wondering if that's not the decision that cost him the game. And usually you don't want to think about mistakes during the match, but since it's relevant to how he's going to sideboard, now would be actually a good time to reflect a little bit, get his mind in the right place. Of course, he can't think too much because we only have 14 minutes on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, 14 minutes, it ought to be enough for these guys to finish their match, but definitely not 100%. And I would suggest that this is better for Jose than it is for Pedro if it does unintentionally go to time. Both these players, they, in addition to just there being, let's put this away decisively, let's make sure, like, playing for a draw is a very dangerous proposition. Yeah. Finishing higher in the Swiss is a very real value once you hit the top 8. Being able to go first in more of your top 8 matches, not having to rely on a dice roll, simply relying on where you finish in the Swiss for who gets the option of play or draw in elimination matches, it's a very big deal.
Yeah, I think Jose has been playing at a very good pace so far. I think he's playing to the win. He's not trying to draw a lot of draw.
You can see that this is the last match going on in our feature match area here. Once this one's complete, well, fairly shortly I'm guessing that there will be the announcement of our final top 8 here. We will, of course, bring you that live on stream.
Lots of excitement.
Oh, yeah. I'm fully hoping that Brazil will deliver some cheers. Honestly, I can't imagine anything but based on all of my experiences since I've been here this weekend.
It's the way it goes.
Jose just double-checking the count on his cards before we go into this deciding game. We've already spoken about how miserable it would be to make some tiny error. If he presented 59 cards here, that would be just the worst way to go out of this tournament. Yeah,
Pedro, I think, has the biggest incentive to just present his deck and be able to start game 3. So it's a little bit of indecision in how he's going to sideboard. If he's not aware of the clock, I mean, could it end up costing him a win in a slot in the top 8?
It would be rough. Of course, either of these players at any moment can turn to the judge sat right by the side of the table and say, can you just confirm to me exactly how long's left on the round? Occasionally, the clock on our feature match area is running slightly different to the main clock in the room, and that's part of the reason that we have the judges there, so that there can be no ambiguity in terms of understanding on timing and so on and so forth. Also, it means that we've got a good, clean game that there shouldn't be any major issues in terms of communication or similar.
Yeah, so Pedro doing a power shuffle now, I kind of got to think he should pick up his pace right about now.
Yeah, 11 minutes and 50 seconds. We went into shuffling and sideboarding at about 15. Once we get less than 10, it does get a little precarious, and it looks like that might be around the sort of time we start. And of course, we don't know yet if there's going to be a mulligan.
Yeah, there's even that to consider. So yeah, I just hope players start the game very soon.
As much as anything,
I want to see it.
Yeah, we just want to see more magic. We also want to see it come to a natural conclusion.
Right.
It's the sort of thing that I feel like, 25 years of Magic, a lot has changed over that time. One of the things that, if there were a way to build it into the rules, if Magic got completely reinvented in 2018, one thing that I think would be attractive would be finding a way of never having a draw.
Yeah.
As things stand, that's not the game that we have. I'm not suggesting for a second that we change what Magic is right now, because it would have to be a very fundamental change to make that happen. But if you were designing this game in 2018 from the ground up, from nowhere, if you could eliminate draws, I think that would be a positive thing for the game. And right now we're in a position where there could be an unintentional draw due to time, and that would be very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's just one of the downsides of tournament Magic. at least it does get you some excitement when players are really rushing through the last turn to try to finish the game.
So we do see a mulligan here, and it is for Pedro Perini here. On the other side of things, Jose Echeverria, he is happy enough with his 7. You saw there a very quick shuffle from Pedro. Regardless of how he felt while he was counting out his deck just before this last game started, now he just wants to get going and get playing.
Yeah, he did win through a mulligan last time, so perhaps he can pull it off again. But of course, not something you want to do in these mid-range mirrors.
All right, 6 cards, and this is the point where, even if you're the nicest guy in the world, Jose Echeverria, somewhere in the back of his mind, there might be a little voice chanting 5, 5, 5.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to blame anyone for thinking it. Oh, no lands for Pedro. That's the 5 Jose was thinking about.
Riley Knight in the background here is like, 4? There's a possibility, of course there is. I mean, if you can go to 5, you can go to 4. That's just, simple numbers.
Yeah, so after 2 great games of Magic, now there's a mulligan to 5. That would be an epic comeback for a Grand Prix top 8 if Pedro can pull it off. Let's frame it that way.
Yes, and there's certainly draws that can do it. I think that you kind of want to assemble a crazy combo, find a way of getting a quick Gomag Angler or a quick Death Shadow, give it a Teemo Battle Wage. Let's get this game done. That's going to be the way to do it. I mean...
Oh, and we saw all of the pieces you mentioned, except the Gomag Angler, I think. So he has the Thought Scour, so he can draw 1 and he's going to be able to cast it fast. And he has Teemo Battle Rage and Stubborn Denial.
Early Inquisition of Kozilek, though.
All right.
This is the absolute worst possible start for Pedro Perini. You have a big mulligan, and then your opponent gets to rip one of the cards out of your already depleted hand.
Yeah,
kind of an interesting decision as to what you take here.
Yeah, it's not an easy one. So he could take that Thought Scour to deny any fast Gomag Anglers. You could take out the Teemo Battle Rage and just try to be absolutely safe for the remainder of the game. Or maybe that Mishra's Bubble, just to... Yeah, I think Bubble looks worse than Thought Scour. It doesn't cost a mana, but he has to imagine that Pedro is going to get value out of his graveyard.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that part of this gets informed by what creature removal you have in hand. If you've got an abundance of creature removal, then... I mean, Teemo Battle Rage doesn't do anything at all until there is a big creature. If you know that you can remove the first big creature, or you just want to hope that they're not going to draw the first big creature, then yeah, leave that in hand, take something else. Ultimately takes the Thought Scour there. I think I like that. And now we're going to get to see what Pedro can piece together from the shambles that remain of his hand here. 7.5 minutes to work with, and not very many cards alongside it.
Plus the value from information, Teemo Battle Rage gets a lot worse when your opponent is certain that you have it in your hand.
So looks at the top, sees a Lingering Souls. It's not like it's a Fate Seal. It's not like it's a Scry. There's nothing you can do about that. Plays a Bloodstained Mire.
Okay, so he found something he can cast this turn.
Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't sack it this soon, because I mean, I guess that maybe he's looking at his hand and going, well, I got a couple of lands. I don't really want to draw another land right now.
Yeah, it's just the timing of it, maybe.
And actually, is that a Faithless Looting now? Or Grim Lavamancer? All right, Grim Lavamancer. This is a nice play. This is a creature that can reasonably deal with some of the early threats that the Mardu Pyromancer list can put down. I mean, for example, a young Pyromancer right now looking pretty bad for Jose Echeverria. We know that there's going to be the potential for an early...
Yeah, so you could line up well with Jose's hand. Because of that Faithless Looting too, it's going to present 2 flashbacks from Lingering Souls. And that's actually a lot of tokens to Green Lavamancer to go through.
And there's also a Lingering Souls in hand as well, which Pedro can't reasonably know about at this point. And yeah, a ton of spirits. This is one way of closing out a game, just overwhelming in the air. Also, so many blockers. Just if it works out that they need to go on defense, this is an absolute army of spirits that Jose Echeverria can muster in this next few turns. And when Grim Lavamancer is attacking, it's kind of a sorry state of affairs. Okay,
so, perhaps something cool that could happen is that Jose saw Pedro's whole deck last game, right? And he didn't see any Engineer Explosives. Now, Pedro re-sideboarded between games 2 and 3. So maybe he has it in his deck, and maybe Jose goes chew all in his Lingering Souls. That would be a way to Pedro to come back in this game.
So 4 spells in the graveyard thus far. I guess one thing for Jose to think about here is when he's going to be able to cast his Bedlam Reveler in hand. Bedlam Reveler is one of the cards that can potentially close out games very, very quickly once it's in play. Also, drawing lots of cards. Who doesn't like that?
Yeah, so I don't think he can cast it this turn, but next turn perhaps. He still has a lot of cards in hand, so a lot of options. It's okay for him to take a little bit of time and figure out his next steps.
I mean, it's okay in terms of strategy, but in terms of pure minutes and seconds, there's not that many of them left in this game. Ultimately goes for Kolaghan's command here. That kind of the safe play to mean that he's not going to succumb to anything anytime soon. Kills off Grim Lavamancer. Looks like he was indicating that he wants to force a discard from Pedro Perini as well here.
Yeah, I think Jose has been playing for the win this whole time. So now he knows he's massively ahead on cards. He has the Lingering Souls in the graveyard. I think very soon he should be on that kill mode, try to finish the game in time.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that can be said is that based on the cards available to Jose Echeverria here, even if time got called in a minute rather than in 4, he has a lot of potential damage lying around in terms of Lingering Souls and so on and so forth. Gurmag Angler, a big pickup here for Pedro Perini, able to get that one down thanks to the number of cards in his graveyard. It's still going to be a rough old ask for that zombie fish to go the whole way, given what we know about what Jose Echeverria is working with here, but definitely more than a speed bump in terms of Jose Echeverria's plans to win this game.
Yeah, it's good for Pedro to present a threat after his Green Lavamancer got dealt with. He still has long ways to go, but he can also prevent Jose from being able to attack in time just because there's going to be at least one block through that Bedlam Leveler. And a lot of prowess triggers if Jose wants to push it through the Gurmag block.
Okay, so Bedlam Reveler does get cast. Another Lingering Souls getting discarded. 3 cards being drawn. One of them's a Blood Moon, and actually in this board, Blood Moon could be a real pain in the neck for Pedro Perini here. Thoughtseed's coming along, revealing that there's a Lightning Bolt and a Stubborn Denial in hand.
Right, good timing to get that Stubborn Denial out of Pedro's hand. The problem with the Blood Moon is that he doesn't have a basic swamp, so he wouldn't be able to flash back his Lingering Souls, so perhaps he takes a turn doing that and then presents the Blood Moon. Yeah,
being able to get 4 Spirit Tokens in play next turn while getting the prowess triggers so that his Bedlam Reveler just large enough to be able to tussle with that Gurmag Angler seems like a nice line of play here. Well, Pedro Perini, in part due to the fact that his hand has just been ripped to shreds at every turn. His turn's relatively quick and easy, but look at what came in for Game 3. There is Engineered Explosives, and that the last card that Jose Echeverria was hoping to see coming off the top of Perini's deck.
Yeah, Pedro with an interesting timing on when he cast that Engineered. By playing it now, of course, he's protecting it from future discard spells from Jose. But now that Jose knows that his Lingering Souls are going to be dealt with, maybe he's not incentivized to flash back both this turn. He's just going to bring them one at a time.
Yeah, and there's no need to get his Bedlam Reveler up to 5 power this exact turn. He could maybe play Young Pyromancer plus one of the Lingering Souls from the graveyard. That's plenty enough incentive to fire off an Engineered Explosives in abstract, except for the fact that we can see there's 2 more copies just waiting there to be flashed back. This is damned if you do, damned if you don't for Pedro Perini here.
So Pedro, he has to hope to find... It's kind of a difficult position, so I'm just going to go through his options. I don't know if they're going to work. So another Temur Battle Rage and say I remove a spell through a blocker to do a surprise 10 damage, that would be an option. Temur Battle Rage plus a Death Shadow, depending on how much damage Jose presents with his attacks, would be another one. But beyond all that, Jose still has that Blood Moon. So Pedro is not going to have a lot of turns to figure out his outs.
Yeah, it's basically all of the options that end up with Pedro Perini winning this game now, I believe, rely on a Temur Battle Rage. One of those already in the exile zone. Typically, we don't see many more than about 2 copies in one of these lists. It's a difficult card to include a full 4 of.
Okay, I'm very surprised that Jose didn't chump block this turn. The fact that he's at 5 life could mean that a second Temur Battle Rage is going to be lethal no matter how many... I mean, he would have to live back a lot of blockers next turn.
Lightning Bolt on that young Pyromancer.
And, well, who's it is at 5? Pedro could have saved that Lightning Bolt and just hoped to top deck another one.
Thoughtseize taking away Blood Moon.
That's... Oh, I think that might have been a misstep by Pedro. I mean, it's such a difficult position in his game for him. Just Lightning Bolt would be a possible out. Maybe he wasn't paying as much attention to the live turtles.
All right, so it looks like the clock that we had on screen was very slightly off in terms of when time was called. This is turn 1 according to the dice on screen, and obviously, you know, if that's what the judges have announced, that's the way it plays. So we have Jose will have 3 attacks potentially here. Pedro just the 2, and these 2 copies of Lingering Souls potentially decisive in this game. An attack for 5 here from that Bedlam Reveler, and then there's a lot of blockers available for Jose Echeverria here as Pedro desperately tries to find a way of... Yeah. A quick draw off the top here.
So yeah, maybe Pedro only has that 1 copy of Lightning Bolt, so that's why he didn't go through the burn plan.
I mean, I guess there's no reason whatsoever to slow roll this T-Mobile Rage. It's either going to win him the game or not. So if that's what it is...
I wouldn't be able to hurt myself, so...
Yeah, as much as we talked about trying to be, you know, the Jade statue that's just sort of standing there completely stoic, this is not the time for that. This is the time for a little bit of Brazilian bravado, and we will see whether or not Pedro Perini is going to be able to do anything. He just has to pass things back. Oh, there's a Terminate off the top for Jose Echeverria. I believe that we're going to see another member of our top 8 decided this very turn here.
Well, Pedro could have a Stubborn Denial.
And if you play it pre-combat, it means that you can at least make a decision as to how much you want to be attacking with. He does play the Terminate now. There goes Gurmag Angler. Snapcaster Mage coming in here.
Okay, so he's not that, but I think he's out of outs.
Yeah, finding 5 damage off the top here seems like a bridge too far, but given that this was turn 3, like, it was incredibly close here.
Yeah, he made a fight out of it. It's going to come down to the very last turn. Very well fought by Pedro, by the way. I think he played great this game. And congratulations to Jose Echeverria, our Chilean representative in the top 8. He's going to be back as a Pro Tour. Very experienced player.
I don't think there's literally a single card in the format that can work for him here. He's going to have a look at the top card. He's going to reveal that's the land on top. There's the handshake. Big cheers from our crowd there. They're very excited with everything that's going on. And that is the end of our match in the feature match area. Big deal there, because it now means that, well, I mean, our feature match area matches all completed. Our top 8 is going to be ready very shortly, one would imagine. And a lot of excitement here in our tournament here in Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is where a bunch of players, they get to go to the Pro Tour. This is where some players potentially get to find themselves hoisting a trophy. Big games coming along here, and we will have more for you after these messages.